also wanted it to be a place that was like a tech hub where there were a lot of tech people, a lot of like digital nomad people. I also knew there was a lot of people there who were like Venezuelan financial refugees, people that came from other places that have immigrated from other South American places because of financial hardships. And Medellin is kind of that place. And so there was also a lot of great things to do there. I've been there a bunch of times. I've really enjoyed it there. So one of the things for the conference that we actually hope to do is we should have George Gammon there, and Jeff Booth will definitely be there. So they had a debate on what Bitcoin did maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, so we would kind of like to have like a match, you know?
Shout out to the Orange Manufacturing Group. They helped me with my logo design, and you know that I'll be ordering their premium hardwood sign and lightning keychain. Accessories are curated from a selection of durable traditional materials built to last. Use the Geyser Fund link in the show notes to take advantage of their trust minimal process, or to save 5%, go to omg21btc.com. That's omg21btc.com and use code AAB21Q. So welcome everyone to Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. Today I will ask Coach John McGraw 21 questions. And before we get started, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name's John McGraw. I've been a Bitcoiner since 2016 and coached college basketball for about 15 years and worked in basketball, the basketball event operation space for about 25 years now. So, and kind of, that was overlapped with college coaching. So some of the years I was running events and coaching college, and some of the years I've just run events and not been involved in college coaching. But, I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2016, and I'm, super excited to try to start doing some stuff in the Bitcoin space here. I feel like it's kind of my time. I've kind of been in the background for a long time, and, and so, I think, you're someone that I've just recently heard of, and you're doing this amazing new podcast, which I think is the concept is really awesome. That's why I reached out to you.
Oh, thank you.
And, I think more Bitcoiners are going to start kind of raising their hands and saying like, hey, I'm here and, I'm involved in this space too. And I want to contribute. And so that's kind of one of the, not to get too far ahead here, but that's one of the reasons why I decided to take some of the skills I've built up in my career and life and applied them to, doing something in Bitcoin.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel the same. Okay, so the goal is to get through 21 questions in 10 minutes. It's a lofty goal. I would say, so I've done 20 or 21 of these so far. Only one person has managed to do it so far, Flo Montoya, and it was about art. So these abstract, sort of long-winded questions can be condensed into a short answer. So it is possible. If you do not get through the 21 questions in 10 minutes, whatever zaps come in can be donated to a charity or an organization of your choice. If you answer within 10 minutes, you get to keep all the zaps.
Okay.
And I will, of course, read the first question before I start the timer. That is going to be set for 10 minutes. So before I start the timer, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I have one question.
Or about how to, yeah?
Should I genuinely try to be under 10 minutes here? Because I think I could have some abbreviated answers. I think I could make it, but I also don't want to do, I want to do the podcast justice here and give, real answers. So
that's entirely up to you. It's the trade-offs and the choices, because we're going to talk about your conference coming up, and I'm guessing that you're going to want to elaborate on that. So it's for you to do the calculus.
No, for sure. And either way, if we get any zaps and and hopefully we get some. I would love to donate them to Maya, who's running for president of Suriname. I'd love to donate them to her
Oh, sweet.
presidential campaign. So if anything comes in, let's give them to Maya.
Sweet. And she will be at the conference, right? Well, I'm
She
jumping
will.
ahead, but okay.
All right.
So I'm so old school. I've got a box. I like folded all the questions up so I can like touch something and, not be too distracted. Okay. Oh, so first question. What can't Bitcoin fix in Florida?
Yeah, this is an easy one, and we can move really quick on this one. I would say Bitcoin cannot fix hurricanes in Florida.
Ah. How's Bitcoin adoption in Florida?
I think Bitcoin adoption in Florida is really good. I mean, overall, like Florida is like one of the states where we kind of have a lot of pride and freedom, freedom of choice, being open, being like, giving people the ability to decide on things that they want to do and how they feel about things. So I think Bitcoin adoption is really good here. I think there was really kind of this point in 2020 when there was a lot of COVID stuff kind of being, I don't want to say forced down our throats, but a lot of decisions being asked to be made about like, hey, if you want to travel, you have to take a vaccine. If you want to do this, you have to do that.
Yep.
So I think a lot of people who said like, hey, they're trying to force me where I live to do certain things came to Florida. And so the gap of people who kind of maybe, and I don't want to use the wrong words, but maybe didn't necessarily trust everything that was coming from media and the government. A lot of those people came
Yep.
to Florida because Florida kind of was taking the opposite stance. So I think Bitcoin adoption is really good here. I think Florida and Texas have a ton of Bitcoiners, and so does California. But I think those are kind of the main Bitcoin states, if I were to guess the per capita.
Yep. What is inside exposure?
Sure. Insider Exposure is a event operation company. We've been running youth basketball events for about 25 years. So our events have grown from a few small events where we were doing probably 5 figures in revenue per year back in 2001, 2002, to where we've consistently done over $2 million in revenue for about 8 straight years now. And we
Oh,
put
wow.
on some major events where we're renting out convention centers, dealing with 6,000, 7,000 spectators and participants. So we're, kind of running events on a large scale at this point, I would say. We're organizing about 25 to 30 events per year. And again, we're doing, around 2 million in revenue. So it's funny because I always try to explain what it is. Like, one of my wife's friends had asked me like, oh, what do you do? She had come to our house. She's like, you have a beautiful home. And, and then she said, what do you do? I said, well, we run basketball tournaments. She said, oh, that's cute. And I'm like, well, yeah, you don't understand. It's really not cute. It's like people, the other event operators, would cut your neck for a piece of your business. It's big business at this point. So there's actually, it's become very corporate. We actually have like a corporation that's very close to being publicly traded as one of the people that like I'm competing
wow.
against. One of my competitors in the field now is going public. So, and they're private equity. So it's hard to compete, and it's a challenge every year to go up against those people, but it's a pretty big business, but we're expanding into other things here. So
Yep. Oh God, I have a comment, but I won't say it. What does freedom mean to you?
yeah, I think freedom means like having the ability to make choices that you want to make and not being limited by regulations and restrictions. So to me, freedom is probably the most important thing in my life. And I think it's probably why I became such a diehard Bitcoiner pretty early on, is because I wanted to have freedom, and I kind of saw Bitcoin as like the opportunity to like have freedom of time, freedom of
Yeah.
choice, freedom to be able to go wherever I want, whenever I want. If my wife and I own some properties in some other countries, and we always just think like, hey, if it ever gets to the point, we have other options. We have that freedom to go to those places. So, to me, that's what freedom really is just the ability to make choices.
Yep. So this is the surprise question that I didn't share with you. The year is 2030. Bitcoin's fiat price is 500,000. How has your life changed?
Yeah, I don't know that my life has changed that much. I mean, over the years, in 2013, I was like the head coach of a school in Tennessee, and it was the coaching jobs are very low paying unless you're like at the major like Division 1 level like UConn or South Carolina. I'm not sure how familiar you are with women's college basketball, but I coached women's college basketball. And so like my job at the time as the head coach of a college was making 15,000 a year and then running some events on the
Oh,
side. And my side hustle was like quadruple the amount of money that I was at that time
oh,
making
wow.
coaching college basketball. And so, but I always felt like, well, that's a paycheck. It's money that I can count on coming in. And so like, I went from being like living in a $600 a month apartment in 2013. I don't know, like I'm not a person to go out and buy Lambos and yachts and, move into a mansion. Like I don't see my life changing that much. I think I'm going to be busier because I think like I'll be
Hmm.
working on other projects. Like I don't know that I can ever retire because I just don't know that I can like sit still. Like I'm 50,
Yeah.
I could retire now based on, the
Good for
way that
you.
well, I just don't live like extravagantly. Like I live pretty humbly. So like, I think I could probably retire now if I wanted to, but like I would be so bored every day. Like what would I do? So I need to have things to do. I think I would just be busier working on other things if, the more kind of fiat, that we kind of acquire being Bitcoiners, as more value collapses into Bitcoin and Bitcoiners become fiat wealthier. Like I can't see like spending any of the Bitcoin. I can just see working on other projects, more projects. So
Yep, 100. What are your thoughts on Scottie Pippen's NFT?
yeah, I don't want to be super controversial, but I totally think he's a
We
scammer.
like controversy.
Yeah, I mean, he's a scammer. I mean, I'm sorry to any celebrity that gets into,
Yeah.
anything like Trump is such a scammer. Like, come on, dude. Like the world liberty to like, dude, you had every Bitcoiner in America was going to vote for you, whether they were the most leftist. Not maybe not everyone, but 99%, even all the super left wing Bitcoiners were going to vote for Trump, and then he did that and he just shot himself in the foot. I mean, he probably lost 40% of the Bitcoiners who were going to vote for him. So Scottie Pippen, same thing. I mean, he's a scammer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Poor
no, no
Scotty.
bueno with the NFTs.
How is Bitcoin adoption in Colombia?
Yeah, there's some significant Bitcoin adoption. I think the problem in Colombia is that whenever people, and this is a pretty generalized statement, so I'm painting with a pretty broad brush here, but when people get some money in Colombia, a lot of times they're working on trying to flip that money. So there's lots of
Hmm.
shitcoiners in Colombia trying to like
Yeah.
2x or 3x their money in a short time. But I'm all about those people because those people are close to Bitcoin and they might even have some Bitcoin. They just need to like they just need like the come to Jesus meeting of like, hey, you're going to get rugged and you're going to end up with, you're going to get burned. You might not have got burned the first time around, but you're going to get burned at some point. And then you're going to understand Bitcoin isn't about getting rich fast. It's about getting rich slow.
Yep.
So like, this is a long-term savings account where instead of like 2xing your money overnight, you're going to like, 5x your money in 4 years or 10x your money in 4 years. So like, they just need the education and to get a little bit more discipline and patience.
Yep. Okay, so moving totally, mixed kids. My husband is also white, so my daughter or our daughter is mixed. When I was a kid, it was a thing. I saw on Instagram that I believe your wife is black and you've got mixed kids as well. What's the experience like for them?
Yeah, I think it's great, but I do think, in the US, we have a real problem where social media and media has made a real effort to um, to separate races and to get people to kind of align with a race and kind of support some of those ideologies behind that. And I just think like we're all one, and so like mixed kids are amazing because they are a product of like we are really all one. And so like like I think there's some uh feeling to like choose a side, especially if you're a mixed kid, like. And I just
Hmm.
I like that part of it I think is a little bit of a struggle. So but I think in the end, like hopefully we go more and more towards that, because then there's less talk of
Ah, that's time.
yeah, sure. So we did pretty good though.
We
But I
did
just
pretty
think there's
good,
less.
better than I did.
Yeah, I just think there's less talk of black, white. Like I just I did I just don't enjoy that. Like to me, I grew up, there wasn't a lot of, and kind of like you mentioned in Geneva, like there's just not a lot of racial talk and racial separation. I would like to get to a point where there's no talk of racial stuff and race, and that just becomes a non-factor. Like it becomes ubiquitous. Like we're all like just one people, we're all just human beings. I would
Yeah.
love for the world to get to that point. That would be, that would make me happy. Like anytime I see like, anything that's separating, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, me too. It's so I grew up in Toronto where as I said when I was a kid it was like a big deal if there was a mixed kid. I wouldn't say that we were segregated like I've witnessed in the US, but there was still like black, white. And I've been living here since 2008, and I noticed that there are different dynamics that come into play. Language is a big deal. So it's not just about your skin color, it's also about which part of like Eastern Europe you come from, or if your parents are German speaking, if your grandparents are from Germany. Like there's so many other dynamics that come into play. And when I cannot avoid the US election right now because it's just everywhere. Elon is promoting Trump like it's nobody's business. So I see things. And I'm so surprised by how everything is reduced to a racial lens. The message that
Yeah.
I've kind of come away with is if you're black, you have to vote for the Democrats. And if you're white, you have to vote Republican. There doesn't seem to be any kind of nuance, any discussion on policies. It just seems like, Democrats black, Republicans white, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty sad too. So it's unfortunate. I think we, again, like you should have the freedom to make your own choices. And I think there's a lot of,
Yeah.
a lot of, I don't even want to, it's like a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure if you're black to vote for Democrat and white to vote for Republican, I think. And so it's unfortunate. You should be able to like think for yourself and make your own decisions. So
Yep. Yep. Actually, this ties in nicely to the next question. Trump versus Harris. How do you think the election outcome will impact the fiat price of Bitcoin?
yeah, that's a great question. I think Harris, if Harris gets elected, I mean, I think we could see the price, kind of be somewhat suppressed and, maybe not move as much as we would like it to, only because, I think a lot of price is oftentimes based on sentiment. And, I think
Hmm.
the sentiment around the Democrats is there's a lot of Democrats who are not for Bitcoin and, crypto in general. Not that I think us Bitcoiners care that much about crypto, but ultimately, like they're going to regulate stuff kind of in one basket. And I just don't know. I think the sentiment is going to be that it's not going to be that friendly. Although, from what I kind of know, the Harris camp is really has like a group of people that are kind of running the show, and they're going to just tell her what to do. So
Yeah.
hopefully there's some, Bitcoin positive people there. But I do think if Trump gets elected, we're going to see, a pretty good run up here. I mean, because I think the sentiment will be really positive in regards to Bitcoin, and I think he's got some great people around him that are Bitcoiners like Vivek and JD Vance and Elon. I think will be a big proponent of minimal restrictions. And so I think there'll be a great price kind of reaction to that. And then in the long run, I actually think Trump will print way more money than Harris will. So I think it'll actually, again, be really good for us Bitcoiners. It probably won't be so great for people that don't own Bitcoin or gold or
Yeah.
hard assets, but it could be really ugly for those people living day to day, but or week to week. But it's there. Trump is just going to print a ridiculous amount of money. So
Yep. And doubling back to what you said, because we've gone over the 10 minutes, so I can kind of finesse my way into follow-up questions. When you
sure.
mentioned your company and so the top line revenues that are coming in, you guys are doing well, and you mentioned some of your competitors. Have you considered, or do you think that applying a Bitcoin strategy by, for example, adding Bitcoin to your company's balance sheet would give you an edge or would help you in the long term in terms of just having a hard asset available if you want to expand in terms of other resources and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we've done that. I mean, I probably need to like work a little more closely with my accountants, but essentially, we've done that. So like, we keep all like, what do you call that? We keep all like cash liquidity in Bitcoin. So at this point, so
Hmm.
we don't keep any like cash on hand. We don't like have any, all of our free funds are in Bitcoin. And then, as essentially we're in such a good space that essentially we don't ever run a deficit. Like we're never cash poor. The cash is kind of
Good
always
for
flowing
you.
in. So we're kind of in a good spot that way that then like essentially everything to like when we take profits from the company and put that into the company treasury, it goes straight to Bitcoin, and then that just sits there. So we've kind of done what Sailor's doing as a private company. I mean, we're
Hmm.
not like creating a debt-based instrument to go out and like create more capital. We only have the capital we produce, but that capital is essentially flowing straight into Bitcoin. And so everything we have is basically in Bitcoin, and that probably will be how we survive in the end. Is that as we kind of get whittled down by a publicly traded corporation with private equity, that will ultimately have that Bitcoin treasury, and will just move to less and less events that are the most profitable ones over time, and then always have that treasury that's continually being built up on the back end.
Sweet. That's the play for a lot of companies, private companies, I think.
Any small
So
private company should be doing it. It's
yeah, 100%. I keep telling, yeah, but it's again, it's visible examples that I think people who are not yet in the Bitcoin space need to see. They need to get their hands a little bit dirty by even buying like $100 of Bitcoin and just seeing how things evolve or dollar cost averaging so that they can see just how yeah, how things evolve essentially. And with that, with time, they'll understand. But I think it's hard, especially if you're an entrepreneur, it's hard to take a chance on something that is new to you and something that requires a lot of time in terms of studying and understanding and experimenting.
for sure. I mean, I actually, to follow up on that, I'm a very small part owner of a vertically integrated marijuana company in Massachusetts. And so we do everything from plant the seeds to grow the
Oh, wow.
marijuana to extractions to testing of the marijuana to meet state standards, and then the packaging and sale at three different dispensaries. So our company has actually been struggling quite a bit because the market has become saturated with a massive amount of
Yep.
marijuana, and they've let anyone who basically has applied for a licensure to get it. And so, and then the tax laws are very difficult because it's federally still illegal. So what's happening is
Oh,
the
wow.
company can't, because it's federally illegal. There's most expenses cannot be written off. Most legit business expenses cannot be written off as an expense. So the tax liability becomes very high, and it's become really hard to keep our heads above water. And I actually myself and then a gentleman who goes by Eric V. Stacks. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's actually a Bitcoiner, does a lot of speaking, and he
Oh,
spoke.
the
I
crowd.
had him speak to the president of my company, but their problem is like we're having a hard time getting. Like the board is probably not going to go because most of the people on the board, and probably none of the people are on the board, are Bitcoiners. So, like, getting them to
Yeah.
understand, like, putting our money in our treasury there in Bitcoin would be a really good idea. But right now, the company's, like working hard to stay alive. So,
Isn't that what's happening with Microsoft, though? I haven't read the full details, but from what I understand, they've got an activist investor involved, and he's demanding that the company put Bitcoin on its balance sheet. So it kind of took like the old school sort of Nelson Peltz, Carl Icahn model to come in and force them to stack Bitcoin.
yeah, I don't know enough about what's going on with Microsoft, but I would love to see them do it.
I know, really. Okay, so how will the outcome of the November election change the trajectory of the US national debt?
Yeah, again, I think with Harris, I mean, it gets going to get worse either way. There's no way it's funny. I see people post on Facebook, probably more than any of the other social media platforms, um, really jaded or one-sided views of, and it's always about the economy mostly. And
Hmm.
I just find it so funny, like, guys, like, I hope you guys understand, like, this has nothing to do with who's president. Like, like we are in a debt spiral. There's no getting out of it. It doesn't matter who's president. Your gas is never going under $2 a gallon. The prices of things are not going to go down. They're only going to go up over time. And there's no way that, like, you're just equating, like, we can look back in time and say, well, the price of gas when JFK was president, but he's not coming back from the dead. Like, like, it doesn't matter if it does. Like, the price of stuff is still going to go up. We are using a debt-based instrument. So, like, the inflation is inevitable. And that's what I find funny. I just don't think people understand that. And then even once they do understand that, it's like still so hard to bring them across the border to Bitcoin. So, that's something I've been working on with my family for a while, because I've got them to kind of come to the realization it doesn't matter who we put in
Yep.
place. Like, it's still like the system is set up to debase. That's how the system is set up. There's no other way for it to run.
Yep. It's not about race, it's not about politics, it's about the money. It's an unpopular thing to say. When I say this, sometimes people are like, just shut up. They don't want to hear it, but it's about the money. Um, so why do you think self-custody is being called into question at this stage in Bitcoin's adoption? And I'm referring to Michael Saylor's infamous interview.
My personal opinion is, what he said was kind of controversial, but I think it was also twisted a little bit on
Hmm.
him, because at the end of the day, like, we don't want centralizing forces, right? I mean, that's why part of why we love Bitcoin is it's decentralized. Every person should be their own sovereign individual. I totally believe that. Every person should be self-custodying their Bitcoin, as long
Yep.
as, and with this caveat, as long as it's big enough, like when they move it, to create a UTXO that's going to be big enough for them to move it later on. So, like, if you're buying on an exchange or you're buying Bitcoin and you're DCAing, you shouldn't be moving every 25 or 50 or $100 purchase off wherever you're
Yep.
buying it into self custody, right? Like, you should build up a certain amount and then move it to self custody. But everyone who has the ability, who has enough Bitcoin to safely move it into self custody, should absolutely be doing that. But corporations and even nation states, like, centralizing your Bitcoin into one point of failure, like a one key or one person self custodying, is not going to be a good idea. So there has to be
Hmm.
some way. and of course you can go into multi-sig and different people get a key, but there has to be a way to do it where, and so I think really that's kind of what Saylor was alluding to is when you're working, like when, you're running a company and there are other people who have a voice in the company, one person, there
Yep.
can't be a single point of failure for one
Excuse
person
me.
who's running the company. It's got to be
Yep.
distributed, just like we want Bitcoin to be distributed. So, from that standpoint, he's answering the question from a different perspective than an individual would be answering that question. And I think as an individual, he would agree that self-custody and self-sovereignty is the way. So, I think he got twisted, his words got twisted up a little bit by people who, maybe just wanted to, get some engagement or do some things like that. But ultimately, and I did see someone say like, Saylor could end up being a villain of this cycle, and anything is possible. I mean, he could end up being a villain of this cycle. I hope that that's not the case because I think a lot of us have really enjoyed listening to him and really enjoyed having him be a big cheerleader for us the last few years. So I hope we don't go down that path, but you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We're all human. Take the good, take the learnings, and I guess leave the rest to the side. In your opinion, speaking of self-custody, what's the best hardware wallet?
Yeah, I used to use a Ledger. I've actually moved to Trezor. Um,
Oh,
you know, both of them have worked great for me. I was a little nervous about the Ledger, and really not necessarily for the Ledger um, kind of leak, I guess, of information, but more so that when I first used my Ledger, I mean, man, I don't know if I took a picture with my phone of the seed phrase or, one of these crazy things that, you hear about happening now where like I heard like North Korea, if you've taken a picture with your phone, even if you've deleted it, like there are hackers that can now like recover that picture through the cloud or
whoa.
something. I mean, I don't even know. So, I moved to the Trezor just because I wanted to get away from Ledger and like any maybe mistakes that I personally made. So, but both
Mm,
devices work fine for me. I used the Trezor for about a year now. I've used Ledger for probably 3 years prior to that, and then prior to that, I mean, like, golly, I just kept my Bitcoin mostly on like an exchange or, I mean, this is back in like 2020 days, like mostly think around like I bought my Ledger in 2017, and then I literally never even opened it, like never even took the plastic wrapper off it until like 2020, and then I'm like, man, I better get serious about this. This is like getting to the
yeah.
point of like it's too much to just be leaving sitting somewhere. So I started kind of taking self custody more serious. Plus, I started understanding like not your keys, not your coins, and a lot of these other things. Like also I started understanding like if we want number go up, we also can't like leave it on an exchange because then how much, paper Bitcoin IOUs can they just give you? So it's better if we, self custody our Bitcoin and then it's really ours and it's really gone from the public eye. So
Yeah, most definitely. Um, so you visited Kenya, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, I think?
yeah,
Um,
I've probably been like 4 times. I mean, so my wife is from
oh wow.
Kenya. Yeah.
Ah, that's the link. And so what was it like?
Yeah, Kenya's beautiful. I mean, the funny thing is, like, I think as Americans, like, and obviously, you being from Toronto, that's not a U.S. American, but it's a North American, right? So I think we
Yeah.
grow up, and I think like Canadians, like especially like Southern Canadians, are kind of fairly similar to Americans in some sense, and
Yeah,
one of those
that's true.
is probably like North American centric, like everything just revolves around us, and everywhere else around the world is just so scary. So
Hmm.
no, I mean Kenya is beautiful. It's an amazing place. Nairobi is a city. I don't know if you're going to go to the African Bitcoin conference in Nairobi here in December, which I would
I
love to
would
go
like
to.
to.
I just don't know if I can go over there for like 2 days and then come right back. It's so far. Uh, but it's Nairobi is a beautiful city. Like anyone who hasn't been there who goes there for that conference is going to be blown away at like how modern it is, how nice it is. Just it's incredible. I would absolutely live there. I've told my wife a bunch of times. She didn't want to leave, and now she doesn't want to go back. So, and
Yeah.
like in terms of like living. But like I would absolutely live there. I mean, it's got, the Wi-Fi there is great. The digital, like the tech community there is great. There's a lot of Bitcoiners in Nairobi. So, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful country. When you leave Nairobi, it's some of the beautiful like landscape and animals. I'm like kind of scared of animals. So, like I don't mess with like if I see people walking their dog, like I don't go up and pet random dogs
Yeah.
animals are wild, right? Like they could do anything at any time. So, my wife has been trying to convince me to go on a safari every time we go, and I'm like, no, I'm good, I'm good. And then we finally convinced my mom and dad to go visit my wife's family. We've been married for a decade, so we said let's let our parents meet each other. And we finally convinced my parents to go because my dad wanted to do a safari really bad. And my mom was like, I'm doing it because it's a bucket list item for him. It's the only reason I'm doing it. I do not want to go. My mom was so opposed to going. She was so scared she was going to get like stung by a mosquito and get a disease
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
crazy terrorist was going to attack her. So the US is propaganda, right? Like if you go to Kenya, you
Yeah.
might get attacked by a terrorist. So, so convince them to go, and it was unbelievable. The safari was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. It was amazing. I cannot wait to go again. And it's funny. I think like all these times I put up this fear of like going on a safari, like, and it's funny. I even sent people like little videos of like the lions, and they're like, "No way, you're that close to a lion without a cage or anything." And I'm like, believe it or not, like it was amazing. It really wasn't that scary. And my parents felt the same way. My mom is like talking about like going back at some point now. So
Yeah.
it's just funny because your just perception of things is so different until you
Hmm.
go out there and do them, and then you're like, the world is an amazing place. And I would just encourage everyone to like get out and see the world as much as you can, especially if you're from the US and this is all you've ever known. Like, get out there, go see some stuff. Don't worry about the warnings they put on the government web pages about, all the terrible things that could happen. They could happen here in the US just as easily. So,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When we went to El Salvador in 2022, I went to the Canadian government website and the Swiss government website, both saying that El Salvador is so dangerous. You have to be careful because of gang violence. And I thought this is interesting because Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert are talking about this transformation that's happening, the renaissance that's happening in El Salvador, and how Nayib Bukele is changing things and how they're adopting Bitcoin. And so, on the one hand, I'm getting these messages and a few people on Twitter at the time talking about how great El Salvador is. And then the government websites saying that it's super dangerous. And my daughter was only 2 at the time, and I had to negotiate and persuade my husband that it was safe to go. And I was like, you know what? I think we should really give this a try and not pay attention to this information coming from the website. And we flew through Florida, which was amazing. So we get on the plane in Frankfurt. We had our masks and everything because you had to at the airport. As soon as we got on the plane, flying from Frankfurt to Florida, there was a former pilot who was seated close to us. He's like, you can take your mask off now. Like, let's stop with the charades. So we didn't have our mask on. We land in Florida. Everyone is just normal. Like, that's the only word I could use to qualify them. Normal. Living their lives. On the shuttle bus, there was a few flight attendants and other airline crew, and they're like, how are things in Switzerland with COVID? And I'm like, well, officially this is what you need to do, but people kind of just do their own things. Like in my village, they sent us letters saying you need to go outside and get sunshine and do manual labor so that you don't go crazy. Like, it was pretty laid back, and they're like, that's how things should be. One lady was like, I've been on my boat the entire time because I wasn't allowed to go to work, so I said, fuck it. I'm just gonna go outside boating, and I've been having the time of my life. And I'm like, this is real life. So that experience in Florida, and then getting to El Salvador and seeing how firstly, beautiful it is. The beaches, the black sand beach, oh my goodness, like just gorgeous. People are optimistic, they're happy, they're working towards something, they're going in the right direction. I was like, wow, this is all wrong. Like I think it was in that moment where it was confirmed to me that I cannot rely on what official sources say anymore, because they're either late or they don't care or they're intentionally misleading. Either way,
All
it's
three.
not always accurate. All three. Yeah. So we'll go on to the next question. Where do Spanish speakers go to get Bitcoin educational resources?
Yeah, I don't think there's a ton right now, but there's a growing community. And I would say Viva Bitcoin is one of our sponsors. So Viva Bitcoin is
Hmm.
run by a gentleman named Tony out of California. And Tony is really spearheading and coordinating and gathering up Spanish speaking people around the world.
Hmm.
And he's doing an unbelievable job. So he's helping sponsor our event in Medellin. And then he's also involved in a event that's going to go on near Cancun in a place called Meridia in Mexico in 2025.
Ah,
So he's doing a really good job. He's hosting a spaces once or twice a week, and he's just helping Bitcoiners throughout Latin and South America really, come to Bitcoin, have some educational resources, go to conferences. He actually sponsored like 10 people to go to Unconfiscatable in Los Angeles. And
oh,
he
nice.
had a paid for a young lady to come up, I believe from, I want to say Paraguay, but it could have been Uruguay. So sorry if I botched that one.
Hmm.
But so I think like Viva Bitcoin is a great hub to go to start getting some Bitcoin education in Spanish. Also, a gentleman who I met from Miami named Sal is doing a thing called Bitcoin Bites. And it's
Mm.
essentially like it's a Bitcoin education for kids. It's a cartoon which he's making down in Miami. So it's pretty funny. It's a little he's at the beginning stages. I think he's only done like maybe 10 episodes, but so there are resources out there. It's just they're smaller and they're growing pretty rapidly. And there's millions and millions of Spanish speaking people out there. So I think it's really important that we develop
Yeah.
this stuff and bring educational opportunities to those people. We have to go meet them where they are. And, I think like for me, like bringing it to Colombia is a big reason why we're doing that is to like provide that
Yep.
education to Spanish speaking people.
Yeah, Viva Bitcoin actually messaged me on X, and I'm not familiar with them, so I'm glad that you're mentioning it because now I'm starting to build more of a rapport. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Um, so, oh yeah, so we touched on this earlier. Will conference talks be streamed live on Zap.stream at your conference?
Yeah, so right now there's no plan on Zap.stream, but I would love to get some more information about that from you, maybe
Hmm.
offline or wherever. And it's definitely possible. My plan is 100% to stream it, and we hadn't really figured out where we were going to stream it yet. So, um, it's possible that we do it on Zap.stream.
Yep. Okay, so sticking to the topic of conferences, there's a growing number of international Bitcoin conferences. How do you find a value proposition to draw people to your conference as opposed to others?
Yeah, I think there's two main value propositions here that differentiate us from other conferences. Number one, this is a small conference. This is not 20, 30,000 people like, say, Bitcoin Nashville or Bitcoin Miami used to be. It's
Hmm.
probably not even in the ballpark of Bitcoin Amsterdam or even Lugano. Were you at Lugano? That was right in your backyard.
Yeah, I was there last year, not this year. This year it was
Okay.
the autumn break because my daughter started school, and so she had the week off. My in-laws were here, so I didn't go.
Okay, well that's okay. But I'm sure like that's even a couple thousand people conference. And so, we're
Yeah.
probably going to be uh 800 to 1,000 people. And so there'll be a real opportunity to like, rub elbows with the speakers and mingle with them and chat with them, and it'd be a much more intimate atmosphere than a lot of these conferences. So you'll have some more opportunities to kind of talk to the people that you've heard speak on stage, and more
Yeah.
opportunities to interact with those people. And then I think the second value proposition, if I'm just being realistic, and one of the main reasons we chose Medellin to do this event, is that this is a beautiful place. This is an incredible city. This is one of the best cities in the world. It's absolutely beautiful, and there's tons of activities to do. We're setting up a bunch of additional ancillary type things like hiking, four
Oh,
wheelers,
nice.
a trip to Guadalupe, and so we have a bunch of opportunities for people to do some really fun stuff in the city, either before or after the conference. And so I just think it's a great opportunity to explore a place that maybe a lot of people haven't been to yet, and that's one of the best cities in the world. So I think those are the two
Nice.
biggest things in my mind.
And what are the dates again?
It's January 17th and 18th, 2025. So coming up here, we
Yeah.
got about 3 months to go, and
Yep.
should be really good.
So, how has Bitcoin influenced your parenting style?
Yeah, my wife and I were talking about this morning. I don't know that it really has, except this is what we were saying. Like when my first son went off to kindergarten, I was like, woohoo, free daycare. Like, I can't wait to get this guy out of the house. He's going to learn some stuff that, like, I'm probably like not super motivated to try to teach him on my own. He's going to get, like, he's going to learn math and English and ABCs and reading, and this is great. And I think now, um, I send my son off and I really worry, like, what are they teaching him? Are they challenging him enough to keep up? And I don't think they are, because I think they're teaching to the lowest denominator. And so they're having to go at the speed for that particular child. And that's okay. Like, that child deserves an education too. But in the most ideal situation, my son is not being challenged and not being pushed. It's too easy for him, and he's really bored already. And I noticed that with my oldest. He got really bored really quickly. He moved at a much faster pace. And there were programs eventually, like once my son got to sixth grade, he got into an accelerated program. So by the time he was
Yeah.
done with eighth, he had finished some in ninth, and then he got into an early college program. So that by 10th grade, he was taking a mix of some college classes. And then by 11th, he was taking all
Wow.
college, 11th and 12th. And he finished junior college. He got an associate's degree by the time he was done with high school. So there are opportunities in public school, but but also I guess for my parenting style, like I'm just questioning like what we choose to do with our kids, like how we choose to get them educated. So we're really leaning towards moving away from the public school system and maybe
Yeah.
doing it. We want to have some social aspects where there's some interaction. So maybe private schooling after this year for a couple of years, and then on to homeschooling. I really like, as a Bitcoiner, it's that's become um, more crystallized in my mind that we have to do,
Yeah.
that you have to educate your child yourself. If you want them to get the education, that you want them to have, then you have to do it yourself. You can't rely on you. Like, it's almost like, I almost feel like it's funny. It's almost like clown world to say you can't rely on the public school system anymore to provide adequate education, because one, they can't, and then two, like, what are they brainwashing them with? So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I would say that's the biggest thing in
Yeah.
terms of, I don't think I parent my child any differently. Like, we've taught our kids hard work, discipline, competitiveness. Like, we've tried to teach our kids those things no matter, where we've been financially. We've never, like, we make our kids work. Like, since we run our own business, we make our kids work. I mean, they've worked since they were about 10 or 11. And my 5-year-old
That's
now,
so
we give
good.
him little jobs to do, like run this paper over to there, or do this little, chore that anyone could do, just so he understands like he's working.
That's so good. That is so fundamental. Yeah. And also at school, what they're feeding for snacks, what they're giving the kids.
Yeah,
You
no,
see
that we've
some
talked about
kids who,
that.
yeah.
right? We
That
talked
like
about like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I just think like, we talked about like, before, like kind of being more animal based, but like you're 100% right. Like, God, the food they're giving those kids, I mean, is just total like chemical slop. And, it is unfortunate. It's probably terrible for them.
Yeah. And then they're going to be diagnosed with like ADHD or something else. Meanwhile, if you just take away the refined sugar, I'm sure they're just fine. Yeah. Um, so what's the main use case for Bitcoin in Colombia? Inflation hedge, freedom of trade, etc.
I really think store of value right now. I think, because again, I think like people aren't really saving money, and um I think, and the people, when they get money, they're trying to like turn it into more money. So I think like
Yeah.
if they were willing to save, but save in Bitcoin, they could accomplish both of the things they're trying to do with their money. So to be honest, like the reality is like inflation has not hit them like Venezuela, and there's a ton of Venezuelan. I would almost call them Venezuelan financial refugees who have come over to Colombia, and Medellin is a place where a lot of Venezuelans have come. But I just think like if you look at some of the countries on the continent, there's a lot of people who are suffering, massive inflation, and it hasn't come to Colombia yet, as it hasn't really come to a lot of, the Western world here, but like it's coming at some point. So I think everyone has to be prepared for that. And so, I think store of value is really the main use case for Bitcoin right now there. I think they should start DCAing and accumulating what they can. And
Yep.
then when they have enough, put it in cold storage. So
Yep. Isn't Sofia Vergara from Colombia? Is it
I don't
Colombia?
know. I don't
I'm
know
gonna Google
Sophia.
that.
So
You don't know Sofia Vergara? She was
no.
on that show that had Al Bundy on it. It's like something family, mixed family or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in the show, she's from Colombia. You're right. My wife actually
Ah,
watched that. So,
yeah.
and I saw it the other day. And I was like, Al Bundy, I love that guy, but from earlier days.
Yeah. So why did you choose? So you pronounce it Medellin, but I say Medellin. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, so I think Americans would in North Americans and Europeans probably say Medellin, but just the way it's pronounced there is Medellin with
Medellin.
with like a
Okay.
J or a G almost. So why did I pick there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think really because it's a beautiful city. There's lots of tech people, digital nomads, entrepreneurs who live there because of the cost of living. I don't know if you follow George Gammon. He's not really a Bitcoiner per se. He's more macro, but he's a very big voice in the macro world, and he talks about
Okay.
fleeing the United States financially. So he's relocated to Colombia, and he lives in Medellin, and so the cost of living there is just so
Ah.
much lower. And so here were my main reasons. I needed to find a place that was different than, the places that already have a ton of
Yep.
Bitcoin conferences, in my
Excuse me.
mind. Uh,
Excuse me.
no problem.
Sorry.
Bless you.
Thank you.
So I wanted to find a different place, but I also wanted it to be a place that was like a tech hub where there were a lot of tech people, a lot of like digital nomad people. I also knew there was a lot of people there who were like Venezuelan financial refugees, people that came from other
Mm,
places that have immigrated from other South American places because of financial hardships. And Medellin is kind of that place. And so there was also a lot of great things to do there. I've been there a bunch of times. I've really enjoyed it there. I also think it's close to the United States where Americans can go pretty easily. From
yeah.
Miami, you probably from going to El Salvador, you probably flew to Miami or Orlando.
Miami. I think it
Yeah,
was
so
Miami. Yeah.
yeah, there's a ton of international South American and Central American flights from Miami. So from Miami, it's about a 3 hour flight to Medellin. So for me, I live in North Florida, so actually in the very northern part of Florida. So I can take a 1 hour flight to Miami, usually get an hour or so layover, and then a 3 hour, 3.5 hour flight to
Nice.
Medellin. I'm there in like 5 hours. I just went to California for Bitcoin First 2 weekends ago, and it was
Hmm.
actually would have been shorter of a flight to fly to Medellin than it would have been to than it was to
Oh,
fly to
wow.
LA. So it's very
Speaking
cool.
of George, it's close. George Gammon, I saw, I like to watch Mike Maloney. I don't know if you know who he is.
I do. I
Um,
met him in Naples a few weeks ago.
you met him.
Yeah.
Naples, Italy or Naples,
No, Florida. There was a Bitcoin
Florida?
event down.
Okay.
There's a lot of Bitcoiners. There's a lot of Bitcoiners in South Florida, both on the East Coast and West Coast. So Naples, like West Coast, right across the state from Miami. So there's a
Okay.
lot of Bitcoiners over there. So
Well, so George Gammon, Mike Maloney, I want to say Mark Moss, and
okay,
maybe another person. They were on a panel together, and I'm not familiar with George Gammon whatsoever. And it was interesting to observe the dynamics between them because obviously Mike Maloney is talking about, I think he said buy silver now, obviously talking about gold, he mentions crypto and not Bitcoin. Mark Moss is all about investing in your business and Bitcoin, basically. And the host asked a question along the lines of, in the long term, where do you put your cash? And so Mark Moss began to reply, saying, invest in your business and Bitcoin. And George Gammon started to talk about, I think his answer was commodities, but he was kind of dancing all over the place. And I thought, oh, wow, this guy doesn't seem like a Bitcoiner. He was talking about catalysts. He was talking about everything, but he did not name an asset. And it was my first time seeing him on a panel and speaking. And I thought, oh, okay, he's still in sort of the old world. Like he talked about the US dollar and how it's not going to die because, and I completely understand, like Saifedean mentions in the fiat standard, the US dollar is really good technology. Like it can be used by so many people in so many regions, but he seems to be stuck or still anchored in the old world, so to speak.
he is. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I love George Gammon. I think George Gammon understands what's going on. He gets it, and he offers some really good counterpoints. So it's like, for me
Yeah.
personally, like I try to listen to a lot of different stuff so that I'm not just like feeling like I'm in an echo chamber, just hearing what I want to
Yeah.
hear all the
Yeah.
time. I think George offers some differentiating perspectives that are really well
Yeah.
thought out and intelligent. Um, he just hasn't come to Bitcoin yet. Like he gets it, I think, a little bit, and he understands what's going on macro wise, but I don't think he's fully come to the accept that like Bitcoin is more than like some little thing that we're playing with, you know? Like he did a interesting journey where he traveled with Bitcoin, gold, and cash, and he tried to pay for
Oh, wow.
things. He like kind of offered. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to go back and watch it,
Just nice.
you know, he's basically testing out whether people will accept Bitcoin, and so he comes to the conclusion that because you know it's hard to get people to accept Bitcoin, that like it's never like that it's not where it should be because it's not a medium of exchange. So where it's not the preferred medium of exchange with like your average person on the street, which we know as Bitcoiners that it wouldn't be. But you know, if you came to me or you, we pick Bitcoin out of those three easily every single
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Right? But he kind of poo-poos it a little bit because of that. But I think he understands that there's some big problems macro wise, and I don't think he's come to the realization that the answer is Bitcoin for as smart as guy as he is. He hasn't kind of figured out that there's a new system. So one of the things for the conference that we actually hope to do is we should have George Gammon there, and Jeff Booth will
Oh, wow.
definitely be there. So they had a debate on what Bitcoin did maybe two
Oh,
or 3 years
sweet.
ago. Yeah, so we
Yeah.
would kind of like to have like a rematch, you know?
And how do you, so this isn't one of the questions, but how do you draw these guests in? So you have Maya, I can't pronounce her last name, Jeff Booth, George Gammon. Do you reach out to them and say, we're organizing this conference, please come? Or is this a relationship that you guys had sort of built up over the years?
No, 100%. Like, hey, I'm doing this conference, please come. So,
How
so
sweet.
yeah, so that's really where it all came from. I mean, essentially being in the event planning business, I guess my one of the things that I was able to take from running youth basketball events is like you have to have some really big time teams and or players at your event to attract the other
Yeah.
good teams. So
Yeah.
like generally we go out and try to like, hey, like what can we do to get your team to play in this event? We go after some really big name teams, kind of before we like do most of the other work to get the other teams. And so in this case, it was the same thing. Like literally, I had a list of four people that I would like. I have to get one of these people to be the headliner. If we can't get any of these people, then I'm not even sure we should even try to do it. And the one of the like the number one person was Jeff Booth, and he said yes right away. So then it was
How
really
sweet.
easy to go talk to everyone else, including even when I'm like talking to like fellow plebs, just saying like, "Hey, I'm running this
Yeah.
event. I would love you to come." The very first thing I say is, "Jeff Booth is going to be our keynote speaker." So it was really easy to go to these other speakers when I say like, well, I'm running this event and we have Jeff Booth. I mean, that's always like Jeff Booth is in the first sentence. So, it was really
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because they don't know me. And so, but they all the people that are speaking and all the people that are coming, I mean, they're all really excited about Jeff Booth. So, it's really important to go get that key figure first and then build everything around that person.
Yeah, definitely. And just one more thing about the panel, because I happened to watch it last night. So it's pretty cool that you're bringing up George Gammon. So you mentioned that he lives in Colombia. Mike Maloney lives in, is it Puerto Rico where he bought his farm? Or I think it's Puerto Rico. Because I remember thinking of Peter Schiff when he mentioned it. And Mark Moss lives in Southern California. And so I'm looking at this panel. I'm guessing that from an individual standpoint, these are high net worth individuals that are on a stage sharing their perspectives. And so I thought, is it true that more and more wealthy or affluent Americans are starting to migrate to different countries or further south because the US is not sort of delivering on the American dream, something that Max Kaiser often mentions?
Yeah, no, I definitely find it interesting. I will say I do think, the northern parts of the United States for the most part have become really um kind of leftish leaning and therefore more
Oh, okay.
closer to, a socialist society. And so the further kind of south you go, more kind
Yeah.
of the rightish leaning people, the more like free trade capitalism type of thing has kind of emerged a little bit. And then, the Puerto Rico thing, and I don't know if you're aware of this. If you're an American, you go to Puerto Rico, as long as you are there, I believe I've been just guessing a number. I think it's 160 days. You do not have to pay capital gains taxes. So you have to establish
Ah,
residency there
okay.
and then
Yeah.
live there for 160 days, and then there's no capital gains taxes. So a lot of Americans who
Yeah.
are in the boat where they might have a lot of capital gains are moving to Puerto Rico and establishing residency there for their as a tax haven. So I think that's kind of why you're seeing that. But I do agree with the overall sentiment of what you're saying. And I think there are people who are saying like, hey, the American dream might not be what it used to be. And I can kind of go get the American, what would be quote unquote the American dream, like somewhere like like you can go to a third world country right now into a major city in a third world and it not be that much different than the US, but your standard of living will be a lot different. So like going
Yeah.
to
Yep.
Nairobi, going to Medellin, like going to these cities, it's like the city makes it to where it's you have all the services and amenities, and technology has caught these third world places up incredibly fast. So like the first time I went to Nairobi 12 years ago, like everyone had a smartphone already. Like
Yep.
technology caught them up. Now, their infrastructure in certain areas hasn't caught up, especially outside the city and in like poorer areas. But even in the poorer areas, almost everyone has a smartphone. So technology has
Yeah.
caught everyone up very quickly here. And so you can go to these places and have a better life. I hate to say it, but you potentially a better life, or
Yep.
more, you can get more value for your value for value here. You can get more value for your value in these other places. So
Yep.
I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yep. Second last question. We probably should have started this one, but I asked in a random order. How did you discover Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, this is really kind of a weird story. This is like so different from most Bitcoiners. So, and I guess maybe not. There's probably a lot of people out there like me. So, I mean, I first heard of Bitcoin a long time ago. I think, you know, um, I would say probably 2012, 2013 range, just on
Hmm.
like, on TV or like just randomly from people. But, I heard about it kind of in context of like Silk Road or like, doing like,
Yeah.
maybe like buying drugs on the internet and that type of thing. And so, of course, I was coaching college basketball. I wasn't doing that, but, I heard about it through there. And then I was laid off from my job as being a college basketball coach and athletic director at a school. And I took another job. And then when I took that job, like almost immediately after, the school had financial problems and closed down. So
Oh
I was going to
dear.
move to where that college was. But when that happened, I ended up not moving. And so I was kind of sitting around the house. I had probably at that point, like a 9 month break. I was only doing like four events at that time. The four events were enough to make a full-time living, but there were no money coming in except when I ran those events. So like, I had 9 months until one of those events was about to happen. And eventually that's kind of how I expanded and like grew the business to where we are now and started running like 25 or 30 events per year. But initially, when like that whole thing happened, I really was like, what am I going to do? I was kind of like waking up with no direction each day and was like sitting on the couch watching TV. It was August. I really remember this very vividly. I saw a thing about Silk Road come on, a documentary. I'm like, oh, I bet this is really interesting. So I watched it. One of the segments was a guy who was like, I'm selling Bitcoin peer to peer, no KY. No, KYC wasn't a word in 2016, but no KYC. I'm doing it
Yeah.
anonymously, right? So he was like, and I'm just buying it on this thing called local Bitcoins, and then I'm meeting up with clients who are coming to meet me in Brooklyn, who's in New York City, coming to meet me in Brooklyn. And throughout the course of the week, I'm making enough transactions that I'm making like almost $2,000 a week just flipping Bitcoin to people who want to buy it anonymously. And I don't ask them what they do. I don't care what they do. It's Bitcoin. They're allowed to do whatever they want. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. An idea. Like, while I'm waiting for my events to happen to create some cash flow, I can do
Yeah.
this. So I went out and I bought a bunch of inventory. I bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and it was like $600 at the time. And
Sweet.
uh, and then I started advertising everywhere I could, buy Bitcoin anonymously, blah, blah, blah. And thankfully for me, I only had one client for about 6 weeks. And then I was like, why am I selling this? I need to just hang it's 6 weeks time it took me to like really get Bitcoin. And then I'm like, why am I selling this to this guy for pennies? You know what I mean? Like, this is
Yeah.
ridiculous,
Yeah, exactly.
worth so much. And so then I just started hanging on to my Bitcoin. Thankfully, I bought a good little stack and then I kept adding to it. And then, and then eventually we had the bull run that was in 2017. And, I was really got excited about it. And then, the bear market came and that's when you really get convicted and learn about it. And then,
Yeah.
everything then happened in 2020 and 2021. And then here we are now about to, probably see another big run up, which would make sense because like Bitcoin at 70,000 is just so undervalued. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
As someone who's been around for 8 years, I feel pretty confident that my opinion is accurate here, and it's $70,000 Bitcoin. I mean, we should be, in the six figures a long time ago. So I think more people just have to start getting it because this is the solution to a big problem.
Yeah, definitely. And so, with Bitcoin, did it help you find your direction, your like true north, or did things just happen to come together afterward?
I would say things just happened to come together afterwards. Bitcoin was kind of always in the background. from 2016 till about 2020. And then in 2020, I think I really got serious, wow, this is like my life. Like most of my free time is being spent learning about Bitcoin, listening to podcasts about Bitcoin, listening to Bitcoiners, going to conferences. Like I just started like pouring so much of my life into it at that point. Um, and from 2016 to 2020, like I really was involved in it, but not to the level that I got involved after 2020. So I think I was fortunate. Like I've heard American Hodl. I don't know if you know who he is. He's pretty funny. I think he's a pretty funny guy. So one of the things I've heard him say is, like Bitcoiners generally tend to get into Bitcoin one cycle too late, and then they generally, F up their stack by some order of magnitude. And I feel
Yeah.
really fortunate because I probably, I could have I got into Bitcoin in the cycle before. I probably could have, but like because I had heard about it and it's kind of right up my alley. Um, but at the same time, like I think I probably got in at the time at the right time that I would for me like that when I was supposed to. Like I didn't get in one cycle too late. I probably got in the cycle I was supposed to because the first cycle I was in, I didn't really like think about it that much. Like I realized like this is a big deal and like I got that this was like the future. I remember in 2016 telling my dad like this is the future of money, but I still hadn't like I wasn't spending all my time on it, right? So
Yeah.
it was a little different. And then in 2020, I really started spending all my time on it. And then, of course, thankfully, like even though I was involved in it, I wasn't spending all my time on it, so I didn't get sucked into things like Celsius and Voyager and FTX and get burned. So like I've been really fortunate that I those two dynamics probably don't apply to me, although I can see how they would apply to most Bitcoiners. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I avoided that stuff too. As soon as I hear promises of yield and whatever, I'm just like, yeah, nope, I'm not paying attention. Like, Satan, go away. Don't tempt me. Like, I
yeah,
just
just
turn it
hold
off.
your Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It's not super exciting. I'm not bragging to anyone about my whatever returns. I just hold it and keep it moving. So, this is the last question. How is the South American Bitcoin ecosystem developing?
I think it's developing. I mean, I think we're at the beginning stages of development. There's some great circular economies in Suriname. There's a great circular
Yeah.
economy going on in Peru. So it's we're getting there. There's two different like there's a Bitcoin conference in Brazil. There's also La Bit, which is kind of a Bitcoin conference. I mean, they have other crypto stuff there.
Hmm.
I've met with the guy who's the organizer there, kind of asked him to pick his brain. He was very nice. Bitcoiner's been really helpful in this journey so far. Whereas, like in the basketball event space, like people will cut your throat in a second. No one would help you. I mean, they literally, they literally would they would try to push you out the door as opposed to helping you. So
Yeah.
the Bitcoin community has been great. So I talked to the gentleman who runs that conference called Labit. It's coming up here pretty soon. I mean, he's welcomed shitcoiners in to try to, one, create some resources to be able to run the conference, and two, to, hopefully in the long run, get them onboarded to Bitcoin fully. So I kind of understand. I sympathize with people like that. I know some maxis that can't even sympathize with that. They just are Bitcoin all the way, or nothing. And I'm with them, but I also I want to get these other shitcoiners. Like everyone has to go through some shitcoinery a little bit here and there. Not everyone,
Yeah.
but a lot of people. So I want to help them. I want to hold their hand into the cross the bridge to Bitcoin only. But so yeah, it's developing. I mean, we're of course, just like anywhere, where I mean we're not fully there yet. We have a long ways to go, but at least there are some pockets, and I hope that we can
Yeah.
kind of create a bigger pocket in Colombia with this event.
Yeah. I hear you about being inclusive of shitcoiners, but they could get people into trouble. And again, I've had exposure in 2017 with these like fantastical pitches of whatever,
Mm.
and I said no, but I saw other people get burned pretty badly, so I just stay away.
Good for you.
I'm Yeah. I think there was a timeout on the Zapstream page, and there were two comments that came in. Halloween is asking if Sofia Vergara is going to the conference.
I I highly doubt that, but I don't know her, so it'd be really hard for me to say.
So I'm typing no, she won't be there, but Jeff Booth will be there.
I
Jeff
was just
Booth
at
will.
Halloween, and those guys they're from the Charlotte Bitcoin group, and Liz is the one kind of spearheading that. She did an awesome job. My wife and I went up to Atlanta, literally just drove up there just for Halloween. So we went there and had a great time and hung out with some other Bitcoiners, got to meet some really interesting people. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh, very good. So I'm gonna have to follow Halloween on Zap.stream, and Kaboom, I'm not following him. Follow and follow. Well, this is really good. We didn't get any zaps though, unfortunately. I think because I messed up the time difference, we'd had daylight savings this past weekend. Probably people here were expecting it to start at 3:30, which would have been 17 minutes ago. So I apologize for that. That happens to me very often. Every single time it happens, actually.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, that's okay. I just appreciate you having me on. I really do. So it's like really important to get out there and, get the word out about what we're doing and promote it because of course, we want as many people to come as possible because I think Jeff is, again, one of the reasons we're doing this is we're personally taking what we do, what our expertise is in and moving from,
Yeah.
in some ways the old system running these sports events to the new system running an event that's about Bitcoin and why people should be Bitcoiners and why they should save their money in Bitcoin and how to do it and what's
Yeah.
happening in the world around them because a lot of people feel pain and they just financial pain and they just don't know what's again like going back to when I was talking about people posting on Facebook like the price of gas when Trump was president like guys you're clueless you don't understand
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with Trump or Biden it's neither one
Yeah.
of them have any say in the price of gas really so.
Yeah. We got a few zaps actually. Kaboom zapped 50 sats. Delgado's Fuego. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yeah, he's actually a sponsor of our event, and he's part of the group that is running Motive, which is the circular economy in Peru. So he's going to
Oh,
be
very
down at our
nice.
conference as well. So, and he's got a great hot sauce, and you can buy his hot sauce with Bitcoin. So it's Delgado's Fuego.
I like hot sauce. I love as
I'm like,
my
you're
family's
letting me
from Trinidad
promote.
and pardon?
I said you're letting me promote sponsors here. This is great.
Oh yeah, go for it. My family's from Trinidad and Tobago, so we don't say hot sauce, we say pepper sauce. I love pepper sauce.
Okay,
Talking about it makes my mouth water. So if ever I meet Delgado's Fuego, I will ask to sample the hot sauce. Very nice.
for sure.
So before we close out, can you remind people important information? How to follow you on socials, again, the conference name, date, etc.
Yeah, sure. So the conference name is Bitcoin Medellin. It's going to be January 17th and 18th, 2025. It's a Friday and Saturday. So feel free, come in Wednesday, hang out for a couple days in Medellin. There's a ton of great food. The nightlife is awesome. There's a lot of things to get out of town and do. You can go to Park RV and do some hiking. And we're going to have some of this stuff set up and on the webpage here in the next, hopefully, 2 weeks or so with some of these excursions that we have planned. Go to Guadalupe for a day. We actually have a young woman who's starting a business called Travel with Bitcoin, and she's going to be setting up an excursion to Guadalupe, which is like essentially like a lake where there's like this really tall kind of like almost like I almost want to call it a mountain in the lake, but it's a rock that you'd walk up. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So come to the conference and experience some of the other things like go touch grass at our conference.
Nice.
I think that's a really big fat like as you asked earlier, like that's one of the value propositions of our conferences. There's all these amazing things you can do in Colombia and come do them. And so yeah, so and then on socials, we're really only mainly on Twitter, which it's BTC Medellin CONF. So you can find us there. And yeah, the website is bitcoinmedellin.com. So pretty easy.
Very nice.